Of the more than 4 dozen major levee breaches caused by Hurricane Katrina, most were the result of overtopping and erosion due to waves and water friction. Congress gave the Army Corps of Engineers billions of dollars to do repairs and upgrades. Some levees and flood walls are now higher and wider. Some, like the London Avenue Canal in Gentilly, now have a splash pad and added concrete paving where the earthen levee meets the man-made protection.
One of the lessons that we learned from Hurricane Katrina was that creates a weak point in the system so that we can have erosion that occurs right at that interface between the levee and the hardened structure.
By June of 2011, Louisiana should have protection from the so-called 100-year storm. Now the focus turns to how to keep the levees from washing away in an even bigger one.
We know that there can be storms that could exceed the design criteria, that elevation requirement that we have. And so we could get wave overtopping, or we could have water that's spilling over the crowns of the levees during a storm. And so we don't want the system to erode if that occurs.
It was the Army Corps' job to figure out a way to mimic that scenario, to put possible armoring solutions to the test. So the Corps turned to a world-renowned water researcher here at Colorado State University to design and build a facility like no other in the United States.
They knew what they needed to know, meaning here's the storm conditions. We need to be able to test our levees against those storm conditions.
With a $1.7 million grant, Chris Thornton, director of the university's Engineering Research Center, was tasked with making waves. He and his students built this huge contraption, 28 feet tall, 7 feet wide.
Well, just this device itself weighs 29,000 pounds.
In one of the most landlocked areas of the country, where hurricanes are never a threat.
6, 5, 4.
The goal is to find out what happens when extreme forces of nature collide with man-made flood protection, and ultimately how to design stronger levees, not just in New Orleans, but all over the country. The world's largest wave overtopping simulator is moving massive amounts of water.
The idea is if you have a storm that in an ocean or a lake that forms, you have a levee, you have waves that are associated with that storm. They hit the levee, crash across the top, and accelerate down the backside. We're simulating the depth and velocity across the crest of that levee with this device.
Through a huge pipeline drawing from the nearby Horsetooth Reservoir, they fill up the tank with 1,200 cubic feet of water. Over and over again, a computer-controlled gate releases different amounts, simulating waves larger than the ones that topped the levees in New Orleans during Katrina.
Even the smallest waves that we have velocities upwards of 20, 22 feet per second, which would sweep a person off their feet immediately.
For this research, a year in the making, it's not the strength of people they're worried about, it's the strength of what's covering our levees. In the flume, on the receiving end of all that water, they're putting 2 species of grass native to South Louisiana to the test. Dr. Stephen Hughes is with the Corps of Engineers Vicksburg office.
These are planter boxes, in essence, that represent the New Orleans levees.
He oversaw the Corps' part of the operation as it put together more than a dozen trays with the same materials they used to build levees, then shipped those trays to Fort Collins. The testing involves Bermuda grass by itself, also the longer, stringier Bahia grass by itself, as well as both species of grass armored with different types of turf reinforcement mats.
These are like a porous fabric or something that goes about an inch or so underneath the grass. And so the grass roots grow through the mat and then grow into the soil. And when there's a lot of water flow on it, it helps prevent the grass from getting pulled out or getting broken off.
After each hour-long round of testing, Dr. Thornton gets a close-up look at how the different armoring methods hold up under the force of water.
If you look carefully, you can see areas that might be little divots, and so I go in and poke and feel, is that soil completely saturated? If it is, I know that water's been sitting in there versus just flowing over. have a couple of spots that have a few small areas of very localized erosion, but certainly nothing to be alarmed about.
Colorado State University has a lot of experience to back up its research. It's been doing hydraulics testing in connection with erosion control for 15 years. But this is something that's never been done on this scale anywhere in the world.
We just don't know. There's been a few tests done in the Netherlands that the Dutch have done, Dr. Vandermeer and his group, of taking their simulated actual levees and testing in situ conditions. So there's a small database for those types of geometries, those types of soils, those types of vegetations. We really know nothing about what's happening over here.
I've done experiments with water for most of my career, and this is something far beyond anything I've seen before.
At the end of the day, the armoring research being done in the mountains of Colorado should speak volumes for flood protection 1,300 miles away.
We're going to undertake this research to find out what our best applications are and put those in the system where they need to be so that we've got a uniformly resilient system.
And result in levees and flood walls the Corps hopes can stand up to a storm even stronger than Katrina. Kim Holden, Fox 8 News.